welcome back to the North Carolina Final Exam Review. Today we're looking at the Cold War. The Cold War happened from 1945 to 1989, immediately following World War II. As you watch the video, make sure that you're answering the guided questions on the WSQ. You may need to pause or rewatch the video in order to answer the guided questions. When the video ends, summarize the video in paragraph form, making sure that you use the specific vocabulary given to you on the WSQ. These are going to appear as bolded and underlined words. Then finish by asking one question. This can be something that you're still confused about, a general question about the content, or a discussion question for the class. The essential questions that you should be able to answer before the end of the video are: how did the Cold War conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union affect America socially, economically, and politically? And then what were the key events of the Cold War? There are three main parts that you need to know about the Cold War. 1. The Cold War included proxy wars in which the United States and the Soviet Union intervened on the behalf of other nations in order to influence the government of that nation. The United States was a democratic nation, while the Soviet Union had a communist government. These two ideas, communism and democracy, are going to be at odds with one another throughout the Cold War. The second part of the Cold War is the space race. The space race was the race to explore outer space through satellites and eventually sending a man to the moon. The arms race was the race to create a stockpile of nuclear weapons in order to ensure the defense of that nation. Containment was the foreign policy designed to contain or block Soviet expansion. The United States wanted to contain the spread of communism to the areas in which communism already existed, which was the Soviet Union and the Eastern European countries that it had taken over after World War II. Containment is going to be the main U.S. foreign policy from the announcement of the Truman Doctrine in 1947 to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The Truman Doctrine, which was stated by President Truman, stated that the United States would help support free people who are resisting the aggressions of outside nations, primarily communists. Truman is determined to block the expansion of the communist Soviet Union into Europe and other parts of the world. Mainly, the areas that are going to be focused on are Asia and South America. The Marshall Plan was a program of economic aid designed to promote the recovery of war-torn Europe, also preventing the spread of communist influence in Europe. After World War II, most of Europe suffered from serious bombings, bomb holes from the bombings of World War II, and then also their industry was lacking. Truman hoped to rebuild Europe without the help of the Soviet Union. 10 Western European nations joined with the United States after World War II to form a defensive military alliance called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Yalta Conference after World War II had agreed to split Germany and the capital of Berlin into 4 separate sectors. Each sector would be led by the United States, France, Great Britain, or the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, in their sector of Berlin, had blockaded access to Western Berlin. President Truman ordered an airlift of food, fuel, and other supplies to the citizens of East Berlin. 2 proxy wars that occurred are going to be in China, Korea, and Vietnam. In China, a group led by Mao Zedong had defeated the Chinese nationalists and declared the People's Republic of China. China had much influence from the Soviet Union and the support of the Soviet Union, and the United States was not able to intervene there. The Korean War, however, began when North Korea invaded South Korea in June of 1950. The Korean War was condemned by the United Nations and identified North Korea as the aggressor. This United Nations condemning occurred when the Soviet Union was out on a break. Otherwise, the condemning would not have occurred. The United States joined the UN soldiers in order to push back the North Koreans back into what they considered to be North Korea. If you look at the picture on the left, the phases of the Korean War are stated. At the beginning of the war, before the United Nations had intervened, if you can see in the far, far left, North Korea had pretty much invaded all of South Korea. The second phase, after the United Nations had joined, was when the United Nations invaded at Incheon, a North Korean city. They are able to push the North Koreans all the way back to China. However, they were concerned that if they had pushed the North Koreans back too far, the Chinese would intervene on behalf of the North Koreans. The third phase of the war was in which the North Koreans were able to gain more land back. In July of 1953, North and South Korea signed an armistice that set the border at the 38th parallel, approximately the same place that it was at before. This is located in the fourth most far right picture of the picture below. Following World War II, the United States containment policy sought to halt the expansion of all communist influence through Europe, but also in Asia. American involvement in Vietnam grew out of the policy of containment and the assumption that if they were able to contain the spread of communism, the Soviet Union would have less power. Following World War II, the French continued to control their colonies in Asia, one of which was Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh, a rebel leader, led the Viet Minh to defeat the French at a pivotal battle, and then following this battle, the French withdrew from Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh led the rebellion for freedom for the Vietnamese. The United States, however, soon replaced France as the dominant power in Vietnam. The United States believed that if one nation fell to communist control, all the nearby nations would also fall to communist control, just like the dominoes. So they called this the domino effect. The Soviet Union was able to launch the first satellite into outer space, called Sputnik. The Sputnik satellite stunned the American public and prompted the United States to establish the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, otherwise known as NASA, in order to launch their own satellite. The United States also began spending more money on education, especially in science and math. Sputnik made education the issue of national security. Congress wanted to encourage the expansion of education in math, foreign language, and science in order to encourage young people to go into aeronautics or something else that would help us to defeat the Soviet Union. During Eisenhower's presidency, Egypt seized the Suez Canal. Castro, who had been a communist leader, also gained control over Cuba, and the Soviet Union shot down an American spy plane flying over the Soviet Union. All of these led Americans to abhor communism even more than they already did. Joseph McCarthy was a relatively unknown U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, and he used a bully pulpit to catapult to national attention communism by making sensational accusations that the U.S. State Department was infested with communists. This movement became known as McCarthyism. Several factors contributed to the rise of McCarthyism. The American public was extremely fearful of communism, considering it to be a violent and totalitarian-like government. There was also fears that the Soviet Union was developing an atomic bomb. In addition, this moved fears even further that there was an infiltration of communist spies in the United States. 2 cases of American spies were discovered during the McCarthy era. Alger Hiss was a former State Department official and was investigated for his involvement with the Soviet Union. A couple, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, were executed for secretly giving information to the Soviet Union about the United States atomic bomb. McCarthyism was very successful because it played on the American fears of communist spies and created a climate of paranoia. People were actually encouraged to turn in their neighbors. Now that we're done, make sure that you answer the guided questions. If you missed one, be sure to watch the video again, pausing where you need to. Once you feel like you have a good understanding of the video, summarize it in paragraph form using the specific vocabulary given to you on your WSQ. These words appeared as bolded and underlined words in the previous part of the video. Then finish by asking one question. This question can be a discussion question, a confusion question, or a general question about the content. Thank you for joining me for this video about the Cold War. We'll see you next time.